Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Team Jesus Outdoors. Hey, today we're talking about inline reels. In fact, we're talking about budget inline reels. Guys, I'm pretty slow to jump on trends. So for the past decade, while the industry trend in ice fishing has been inline reels, I've been kind of slow to jump on that trend. This year I've kind of jumped on the bandwagon and I've started experimenting a little bit with inline reels just because of the inherent flaws of spinning reels when we're talking about ice fishing. I began this review process by doing extensive research on 10 or 12 different inline ice fishing reels. Spinning reels, and in particular the tiny spinning reels that we use while we're ice fishing, have two inherent design flaws that cause a serious issue when you're ice fishing. First of all, they encourage a lot of line memory on those little spools, which creates a bunch of coils in your line. And secondly, they encourage and exaggerate line twist. Both of these line conditions can cost you bites when the fish are finicky. The primary reason that I would suggest that you switch from your traditional spinning reel to an inline reel for ice fishing, and particularly on your panfish rods or your perch rods, your rods at the lighter end of the spectrum, where you're running 2 or 3 pound test. Your traditional spinning reel does a terrible job of line management. The spools on our little ice fishing spinning reels are very, very small spools. They encourage a ton of line memory, which causes those little coils in your line, and they also encourage a lot of line twist. If you've ever looked down the hole when you're fishing shallow water and see your jig down at the bottom of the hole just spinning in a circle, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about line twist. Line twist can spook fish. Line twist can be a dead giveaway that your bait is an artificial bait. Line twist can ruin a day when you've got finicky fish in clear water. So your inline reels solve that dilemma by, first of all, having a much larger arbor, so you're not wrapping your line around such a tight little spool. So you've got a larger arbor, and the line goes on and off the spool in a straight line. It goes on the spool exactly the way it comes off the spool. So these things just do an incredible job of line management, which lets you prevent those tiny jigs, those tiny tungstens, those tiny teardrops, your real small jig and spoons. Lets you present those tiny baits to finicky fish without that bait sitting down at the bottom of your line spinning. Now, the first inline reel that I tested, and probably the most simplistic of the inline reels, one of the oldest versions, is the old Clam Stright Drop. The Clam Stright Drop is basically just the 21st century version of the old spoolie reels that we all remember, that most of us had back in the day. The Clam Stright Drop does not have many features. It does not have a free fall feature, or there's no way to disengage the reel spool, so you've got to peel line off by hand, which if you're fishing shallow water isn't necessarily a terrible drawback. But the real fatal flaw with the Clam Stright Drop is that it's a 1-to-1 gear retrieve. There's no gearbox, so you take up very, very little line. If you're fishing water 10 foot or deeper, it would take forever to reel your line back in. You'd be better off just going hand over hand. While I was actually very happy with the build quality of the Clam Stright Drop, the 1-to-1 retrieve speed was just a deal breaker, so I sent the Clam Stright Drop back. Now guys, when we step up into the next level of functionality in inline reels, we get into kind of what was the next generation of inline reels, and that's your inline reels that have a push button to release the spool. So by pushing this button, we release the spool, allowing our baits to pretty much free fall down until a crank of the handle re-engages the spool. I have two examples of this style of reel. This one here is the Eagle Claw, which is really a bargain at 26 bucks, except for the fact that it has one pretty serious flaw. There is no fender or guard over the arbor on the Eagle Claw reel. If you are palming this reel, the palm of your gloved hand is always in contact with the spool. That is the one flaw that I find with the Eagle Claw that honestly is kind of a deal breaker, unless you prefer to hold your ice rods like you would your standard spinning reel. In that case, this style of reel would work fine for you and would be a bargain at 26 bucks. Probably the most common reel at this level of functionality is the 1-3 fishing descent. Some guys call it 13 fishing. But this is also a push button spool. This one happens to be a right hand model. But if we disengage the spool, this little 3mm tungsten weight is plenty enough to drop that spool as it's free falling. The one complaint you'll hear a lot of guys make about this style of reel is that sometimes your spool will spin so fast that when your bait hits the bottom, you'll get an overrun, much like you would with a bait caster. So to prevent that, you can either kind of keep a finger on the spool and slow the descent, or most of these reels have a spool tension knob, and sometimes you can keep enough tension on these reels to keep them from overrunning. Now, one feature that's kind of cool on both of these reels is that they do have a bait clicker. So with the bait clicker engaged, you get noise. And the one thing that it seems to me that would be cool for is if you use this style of reel for a dead stick rod, you can open the bail, turn on the spool clicker, and you'll get an audible signal when a fish takes your bait. Like I said, this 1-3 fishing descent reel is probably the most common reel that you will find in this level of functionality. You can find this reel all day long for about 40 bucks, 35 to 40 bucks, online at least. Retail in store, you're probably going to pay 40 bucks or slightly higher, but now, unlike the Eagle Claw, this does have a little bit of a fender back here, so that if you're palming your reel, your palm is not dragging against the reel spool. So I will say that's a very cool feature of the 13 fishing descent. However, what I'm not impressed with the descent, and at first I thought it could have been just the copy that I purchased, but this reel is super sloppy in construction. The reel handle's very sloppy. The spool is sloppy. I've taken it apart and looked to see if there's anything that needs to be tightened. It just seems to be that the quality control in this 13 descent just leaves a bit to be desired. So besides the fact that these reels are pretty limited in functionality, there's just a few things about each of these reels that keep me from being very excited about it. Now, at the $25 to $30 range, this Eagle Claw if you can get past the lack of a fender, I mean, it's hard to beat an inline reel with that level of functionality for 25 bucks, 25 or 30 bucks. The next level of functionality in the development of the inline reels really comes into the trigger. So now, instead of having a push button to disengage the reel, you've got a trigger which allows your bait to free fall. And that may not sound like a really big deal, but from an efficiency standpoint, it makes all the difference in the world. Deploying your bait is just so much faster. And when you've got a fish, when you've got a fish on your graph that's following your bait, maybe you're bringing your bait up to see if a fish will follow your bait, and then that fish goes back down the water column. The ability to just hit that trigger and drop your bait a few inches or a couple feet just makes all the difference. At this upper end of the functionality of inline reels, you generally have a fully protected reel spool, so that your palm is never in contact with the reel spool. These are just now what I would consider to be full functionality of inline reels. This particular model is the Pfluger Trion. And I gotta say, at 50 bucks, because the prices on these have been coming down a bit, and you can get this reel now, you can find this reel pretty easily online for about 50 bucks. And at 50 bucks, this Pfluger Trion, in my opinion, is a pretty darn good deal. I'm very happy with the functionality of this reel, very happy with the construction. This reel is just an incredibly efficient way to present a bait through the ice. The hands down winner of the Battle of the Budget Inlines, by far, is the Ice Hopper Trigger Drop reel, available at Sportsmen's Direct. I believe this reel is still only available directly through Sportsmen's Direct. But at 40 bucks, this Ice Hopper reel is far and away the winner of the Battle of the Budget Inlines. This thing has all of the functions and features of your $75 to $100 reels. Build quality seems to be rock solid. I found no issues with this reel whatsoever. This reel has the trigger. This reel has a really nice smooth drag that you activate with the star drag like a bait caster. Has your spool tension knob. This reel just has every feature you could possibly want in an inline reel at about half the price of the more expensive reels, like your Black Betty or your Freefall Ghost. Hey guys, I hope you found this information useful. If you're in the market for an inline ice reel, I really encourage you to check out the Pfluger Trion, and especially the Ice Hopper Trigger Drop. I think these two reels are the best bargains right now I can find in an inline ice reel. But guys, I hope you found this information useful. I hope you guys will click that subscribe button. We put out a ton of content here on Team Jesus Outdoors. Hey guys, make sure to smash that like button. Guys, remember one thing, what we always say around here at Team Jesus Outdoors, there's only two kinds of men in this world. There are men that need Jesus, and there are men that need more of Jesus. I encourage you to check out our other channel, TJO Men's Ministry, and find out how you can take your next steps with the Lord Jesus Christ. Friends, thanks for watching. God bless, tight lines. We'll see you guys on the ice.